We've crafted this exceptional compilation just for you, in case you happen to miss any of our videos. Whether you're seeking a delightful way to spend time, longing for something intriguing in the background, or yearning to uncover the mysteries of stranger teas, we've got you covered. By liking and subscribing to our channel and activating the notification button, you guarantee that you won't miss a beat. So the next time sleep eludes you, you'll know precisely where to turn for an engaging and captivating experience. We encourage you to share your favorite moments by leaving timestamps in the comments section, allowing others to delve into the videos you recommend. Without further ado, let's embark on this thrilling journey together. Sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in the fascinating world of our captivating videos. Let the adventure begin. Signs to know if you're ugly or not. Story 1. Yes, there's one surefire way to know if you're attractive or not. Have you ever received compliments from complete strangers of the opposite gender? That's it. They must be from strangers, not from family or close friends. People who do not know you personally. If you've received them to your face or have been told you are by others more times than you can count on two hands since you were a kid, you are very attractive / sexy / beautiful / hot, etc. Strangers don't know you, so there's no obligation to lie to you. It's sincere and free of subjective bias that can accumulate when someone knows you personally. If you've received a couple since you were a kid, probably can count on one hand or less than two hands, you're above average. Not necessarily top tier, but close to it. You're good looking or really cute rather than hot or sexy or beautiful. If you've received none, or at most one or two, you're most likely just plain average. Nothing about you stands out and you blend in. That's not ugly, though. You have features that don't wow or repulse. You're a Honda Civic. You're ugly if you've actually been told you're ugly to your face, or overheard someone call you that. You've tried to talk to girls or guys in the past with no intention of flirting or anything, and they genuinely acted repulsed or scoffed at you. It's such a blatant negative reaction, it was palpable. The thing is, most people are not truly ugly. Most people who think they're ugly are really just average. Just like how really beautiful people are rare, actually genuinely ugly people are rare too. I think there's gotta be a little leeway in this. This probably pans out in general, but then there are the trolls in this world. For some reason, they'll be willing to tell you to your face that you're ugly when you're not, or maybe they're trying to manipulate you by telling you that you are beautiful. Probably because you hold a position of power and you have some form of gatekeeping that they're trying to get past. What they call the social engineering. Story 2. The fact is, physical beauty and unattractiveness is all relative. Everyone has their own tastes. Crushes are called crushes because more often than not, for all of us, the attraction isn't mutual. There are 8 billion people in the world. Don't get hung up or depressed over a handful. If someone doesn't like you back, it's neither a good or bad thing. It's just simply a thing. It's what you feed it after that either makes it good or bad. True ugly and true beauty are inside. Your soul, your personality. I don't care if you're the hottest physically attractive woman or man for the ladies. If you have an ugly attitude, you immediately become the grossest thing on earth. Especially if you're putting others down, treating employees and waitstaff like junk, etc. Skinny can be hot as hell. Chubby can be hot as hell. Everyone has their ideal weight where they look their best. And there's no one style, look, haircut, etc. Take breast size. Women make too big of a deal over it. I've always said, big or small, I love them all because they all can be and are sexy. Yet too many women get down on themselves if they have an A or a B cup, which they shouldn't. It's all about how you rock it. And rock out like a rock star, 'cause you are damn beautiful. If a guy or woman has a problem with it, then it's their problem, not yours. Don't make it yours. Just get rid of the person putting you down and find someone who's wholly into you. This is very key. Your attitude can really affect your appearance to others. What good is someone who's physically attracted if they're just going to sulk or not talk or answer in one-word sentences? Especially someone that exudes some sort of aura of fear or disgust. Someone who's actually going to be friendly and fun to be around? That goes a long way. Now, we're not talking about that "you'd be a lot prettier if you smiled" junk. It's not something that you can get forced upon by other people. It has to be a genuine attitude. Story 3. I'm an average guy, and I manage to get the girlfriends rather easily, but it's mostly thanks to the gym. On the other side, my best friend is a 10 supermodel-looking mother-sucker, and it's extremely frustrating to hang out with him. He literally gets more attention than a girl. Like when we just walk in the street, there's always several girls coming at him to tell him, "Bro, we just wanted to tell you that you are so beautiful." And with my friends, we're just standing without being looked at. Every time he posts random stuff on Instagram, his phone is bombarded by girls' DMs. The worst thing is when we go to clubs and girls start dancing or kissing me. As soon as they see my friend, they're all like, "Wait, is this your friend? He's so handsome." And then completely forget about my existence to try to get him. Thankfully, he's a real bro who's very humble and a bit of a jerkwad with girls. So he always answers them with, "Okay, so what? Okay, I don't care." Or just push them aside with his hand and leave. He just accepts the absolute perfect girls who work out and have a perfect face. He also often creates fights unintentionally between couples because girls are so attracted to him that they often try to get his Insta or number while the boyfriend is in the same club or room. It's frustrating to have your existence and those of all men in a room get eclipsed by one single guy. And this is your best friend? At least he's humble. It doesn't sound like he rubs his quote-unquote conquests in your face. Does he ever try to wingman for you? As far as getting his Insta or his phone number, that's the kind of behavior guys are always accused of when chasing after women. It's kind of comforting to know that girls can be douchebags like this as well. That behavior is not just guys. Story 4. Hey guys, as someone who was never looked at as being beautiful, not even close to that at all, you can look attractive. You just gotta put the time into it. Try different haircuts. Shave. Don't shave. Shave just a little. Wear clothes that fit you. If your body isn't considered attractive to standards, you can still find clothes that make you look good. I'd suggest looking in thrift shops. Women or men's section don't matter much in these anyways. Take anything that you think looks good and try to make yourself as a style. Guy or girl or envy doesn't matter. You can always try makeup to accent some of your features or to add some. You can even do art with it on your eyes. If you have a big nose or a big forehead, I do, making your eyes the center of attention can make people think you're really attractive as they'll focus their sights on there. Anyways, there's plenty you can do. We may not be born to be hotties by definition, but it's possible to take care of ourselves enough to look good, and then the attractive part comes from your confidence. Hope this helps some. For me, it worked big time. What made you quit your job? Story 1. I'm a lifeguard and should be paid $13.78 an hour, although they made it very clear, in a very obviously furious tone, to only expect 13 because the government thinks it's okay to take such a large amount of money away from the youth they should be serving. Haven't left that place. They take such good care of us, and we come first. Had some visitors try the customer is always right hogwash, and man, I still smile about it. My favorite experience was when I told a parent that her son can't go down the cannonball slide with goggles on. The slide drops a foot down into 12-foot deep water, and I was at the top regulating the two slides. We have this rule because if goggles fall in, we have to turn off the slides and send a guard in. She goes on a rant, furiously stating that there wasn't anything written that said that, and her face when I gestured to my right to a sign that said, on the cannonball slides, please, 1, listen to the lifeguard, 2, do not wear goggles or jewelry, 3, exit immediately. She got even more upset and said that I was being a dumb old bratty teenager and should be fired for mistreatment of paying customers. All the while, I'm still letting people down the slide and checking with the other guards that no one drowned. This enraged her, and she tried to physically turn my body to look at her, saying I was being a selfishly rude and entitled jerk. Calmly, I give a quick double whistle and I said to her, "Congratulations, ma'am. You just ruined this experience for everyone waiting in line." She then said, "Curse you, you absolute dumb old piece of filth," then proceeded to send her kid right after another. I blow a long whistle to alert the guard below. Forgot to mention the kid was too small anyways, and he reacts immediately as the kid starts to drown. A supervisor came up to me and asked, "Was that you?" And with delight, I shake my head and point to the woman. "Anything else I should know?" the supervisor said, barely keeping a smile off their face. "Not unless you count that they disobeyed the very explicitly mentioned rules of listening to the lifeguard and allowed their kid to go down the slide with goggles on, as well as not properly measuring him and attempted to physically prevent me from doing my job by placing her hands on me rather aggressively." The supervisor's face dropped at that one. Mean parents are one thing, but physically touching the guards without their consent is enough to get you kicked out. The supervisor said, "Officer, could you meet me at Cannonball? We have a situation of potential assault on one of our guards." Another supervisor arrived and the situation was explained. They apologized for what happened to all the other guests and asked them to leave, all the while the woman is flipping out, saying we were detaining her against her will. The officer, yes, a real police officer, arrived, and I recounted the situation whilst the woman is screaming at me, calling me a liar. "Well, I've already requested the video records to be reviewed, so we'll hear back from them soon. In fact, let's head up there now," said the officer. The woman protests, saying that they can't force her to do anything. "Ma'am, I've been told that this is a potential case of assault, and I don't know what ungodly planet you come from, but on Earth, we take that very seriously," he said in such a satisfyingly patronizing voice. The woman begrudgingly agrees, and sure enough, literally everything I said was true. I contact my parents, I was 15 at the time, and they tell me to wait since they were already near the area. They show up later to be told that if required, legal measures can be taken if they felt I was put in a dangerous situation by this woman. I agree not to press charges against her in exchange for $50 in compensation and $50 fine for the water park for violating the terms they accepted when entering. It felt really good walking out of that office. I'm confused. This was a great story, to be sure. But the subject is, what made you quit your job? The way they treat the employees, I wouldn't leave this job either. I wonder why this one showed up. Well, let's keep reading. Maybe we'll find something else. Story 2. Worked for a grocery store in high school. Our store manager was just the biggest shrew to everyone. Really enjoyed my coworkers, so I just ignored her hogwash. Well, one day she was unusually nice to me and asked me to spend the day outside getting shopping carts. Now, usually I was banned from doing this because you could smoke while getting carts. This was in the 90s, and she knew I loved doing it. So needless to say, I was instantly suspicious. Turned out the president and vice president of the company were visiting our store that day. We were the prototype store for a new company plan, which included a hot bar ice cream shop with a dining area for customers in the middle of the store. Well, I decided, forget it. I have to mess with her. During a mandatory water break, as being in Florida, if you don't drink lots of water, the heat will get you. Ran into her and the two guests on the way back out. Shook their hands, had a pleasant conversation with them, and best of all, I called her by her first name, acting like it was her general policy to make us more like family. Let's just say she was the type that made you put emphasis on calling her Ms. last name. Well, the president was extremely happy to hear this, and shortly after made it company policy to have managers go by their first names with employees. So needless to say, her hatred of me went to fever pitch. She couldn't fire me after that, as they insisted I be put into training to be a manager. And while firing me would have been highly suspicious. Well, she tried to frame me from stealing from a till. Now this happened about a few weeks later, and she insisted the cops be called, had me locked in an office to wait for them the whole 9 yards. While worried, I also knew, because this was a brand new store that was a company prototype, I knew the camera system was operational. She had gone into my till. I usually was a bagger, but I had also been trained to be a cashier while I was on lunch. She then tried to stash the stolen cash into my locker, but she didn't realize I never used a locker, as I kept my stuff in my car. Well, when the cops arrived, one came in and interviewed me after talking to her. The conversation went something like this. Cop: "Okay, kid, where's the cash?" Me: "No clue. Just got back from lunch." Cop: "Where were you during your lunch?" Me: "I went to Taco Bell," which was on the shopping center property. "Why don't you guys just check the cameras? Likely you'll get to the bottom of this faster that way." Cop: "Look of confusion. They're working?" Me: "Yeah, been online since the store opened. Go talk to the owner." Store owner had an office in the building, as this was to be his home base for several of his stores. Cop: "Okay, I'll do that. Just sit tight." Me: "Yeah, bud, no problem." They take about 15 minutes, then come back in. "Sorry for the confusion, Mr. Loco 440K. After reviewing the video, we found the money and you're free to go." Manager was being handcuffed and placed into the back of a cruiser. See, she thought she had disabled the camera system, but all she did was disable a monitor in the store manager's office. The master system was in the owner's office. So, needless to say, she gets fired, charged with several crimes, and I walked out and never returned. All this because I embarrassed her in front of the president and VP of the company. All right, this was another good tale of revenge, and he did leave this one, but why? It sounds like he liked this job and everybody else except for this person. She just got arrested. Why didn't he stay? He was on track to get a better position. It sounds like he got rid of the only problem that he had with the job. I'm still confused. Story 3. I got a story too. I work at a German restaurant that I used to really love. I loved the food and the atmosphere and felt so happy there. So I decided I wanted to work and thought it would be a great experience. Boy, was I wrong. My boss was super pushy and demanding. We weren't allowed to sit anywhere, not even in the areas designated for employees. And if we did so, we got in trouble. Keep in mind, in this place, you have to walk around, carry and load multiple items, sometimes really heavy, every single day. I also got 12-hour shifts constantly and was just so exhausted. The head chef of the place was nasty to everyone too, except his kids, of course. My boss got onto people for everything, but there was one night where I finally had enough. It was a Friday night, and it started to unravel when the chef made barbecue for the employees for dinner. In this place, you got a free breakfast and dinner. We were all eating when my boss called everyone for a meeting to discuss policy. The head chef was furious and cussed him out on the spot, with my boss muttering, "I was just suggesting." Anyway, we all went for our meeting, which never happened, and the dessert before the meeting was banana pudding. This was my boss's favorite dessert outside of German desserts. So I got asked to cut it and wanted to be nice and give my boss a larger slice. You know how he responds? He yells at me for giving too large of a slice and making a big deal about it in front of everyone. It was so embarrassing. Then I got assigned serving beers, and one of the beers, which I never served, came back because it got to the wrong table. This girl at the bar tells me to check my numbers, and I politely tell her I didn't serve those beers. Her response? To be rude to me, of course. Me, finally having enough, said, and I quote, "Look, I'm not going to check Jack for beers I didn't serve." There was this jerkwad who worked at the bar who told me to hush all the time and shut me down whenever I had an opinion. And I told him plainly and meanly, no. The look on his smug face was priceless. Anyways, a few minutes later, my boss comes a few minutes later and asked if I cussed out said employee. And I said, no. Then he says, "Well, 3 people said you did. So if you could be so kind as to clock out and we'll talk about it on Tuesday." I was done. Clocked out and never came back. Never will either. Too long didn't read. Worked at a restaurant I liked. Boss, chef, and employees were jerkwads, got me in trouble, and I left. Finally, we get one that gets to the gist of what we're talking about. How long was he working for this place? The whole thing just seems like an excuse for the higher-ups to just jerk around all the people below them. No respect for anyone. Babysitters? What made you call the cops on the parent of the child? Story 1. I wish there was some better way to censor all of what I'm about to share, but there isn't, so here goes nothing. I, a 15-year-old non-binary kid, grew up with my older brothers and my mom. My dad was always gone at work, and my mom was an abusive drunk. What I can remember is from the time I was about 6, I believe my mother had a friend over, and she had gone to do something. Her friend grabbed me and tried to say to me, I won't go into details there, but I told my mom, and she called me a party girl and said I was asking for it, and that I deserved whatever was going to come to me. I also remember something similar to that happening when I was 7 and 12. But the difference is, when I was 12, my mom was no longer in the picture, and my dad had saved us from her. So he was home more to take care of us. What happened to get my mom out of the picture was she had quit alcohol and moved on to heavy substances. She had believed she was pregnant with Jesus, and her family had to terminate for him to be born. Keep in mind, my mother had her tubes tied after I was born, so my mother tells us she had visions from God, and certain things were going to happen, which none of them did. Anyways, January 10, 2020, at around 2 a.m., she wakes me up and says we're going to go get groceries. I should have been suspicious of it since it was literally 2 a.m., but I was like, okay, whatever, and left with her. It's important to add she stole the vehicle we used. Fast forward a little, and she starts telling me her plan to unalive my dad, how she's going to crucify him, and I'm gonna help, and there's gonna be a Last Supper. We get to the store, and she's piling cheese and pastries into the cart, and we get to the checkout. Her card declines. She pulls out her phone and puts on this weird old playlist she made a while before she even started having these visions. I'm standing there embarrassed. There's people behind us, and she goes, "It'll work. Just wait." It doesn't work. She's like, "Okay, we'll walk around the store and try again later." So we do that, and she sees a pregnancy test. She grabs the most expensive one there and grabs my hand and starts speed walking to an aisle. I see her open her purse, pull out a Bible, and put the pregnancy test in there. I'm kind of thinking, okay, what the heck? You're literally on your period. So we go to the bathroom, and she makes me stand in the stall with her while she opens it. She goes, "Sorry, sis, my anxiety medication is so hard to open right now." I don't respond. She takes it, blood all over it, and puts it in her purse. We leave, and again, her card didn't work. I think we're gonna go home and let that be that, but nope. She turns off her headlights, and at this point, it's like 3 a.m. She goes, "Honey, take off your seatbelt. You're immortal." And she starts driving at about 75 or 80 miles an hour. I'm scared out of my mind, thinking I'm about to expire. Then I ask her if we're going somewhere, and she says, "Yes, we are." Like, oh, here we go again. We go to this town where she used to work. She got fired and banned from the gas station she worked at because she has broken and entered into one of her coworkers' houses. We get there, and since she isn't allowed in there, she sends me in there. I tell the guy, "Hey, my mom said her car is broke down and she's pregnant. She wants to know if you can come out and have a look at it." The guy goes, "My shift is over at 6:15. I can go have a look after." I say okay and go tell my mom. She tells me to go back in and say, "I have waited lifetimes for you. Don't let this be for nothing." So I did. And he looks at me and goes, "Is Jessica your mom?" I say, "Yes." And he says, "You need to get out of here. Now." I tell my mom, and she goes inside the gas station herself, and the guy hit the panic button, I guess, or called the cops while I was outside. because my mom used the bathroom, and while we were in there, she told me to say my dad held us at gunpoint and made us go and do what we did. The police arrest my mom, and this bald guy named Mark, the sheriff, starts asking me questions. What happened? How old are you? Where's your dad? Etc. I answer his questions, and I'm taken to the station, and they find my dad's number to inform him of what had happened. Remember the vehicle my mom had stolen? It was my dad's, so he didn't have a way to come get me. His best friend's pregnant wife gives him a ride, and when he gets there, I see him and take off running. "Daddy!" I start crying. He's crying. "Are you okay, baby?" I'm shook, but I say yes. I get my stuff, and while I'm getting it, I hear my dad screaming at the people, saying my mom is crazy and abusive and needs some serious help. They tell us to file an order of protection. Fast forward to about 8 a.m. My brother and I are in a courthouse with my dad. We explain what happened. They explain what'll happen. Midway through, my mom calls my dad from the jail to bail her out. My dad hears her voice and immediately hangs up, and we continue the paperwork. 2-hour court-granted visitations once a month, if we so choose. I've gotten into therapy. It all happened because I attempted self-destruction. I'm doing better now, and so is my dad and brothers. My mom had also been my dad, and he didn't even know she was fully us because he worked so much. I know this sounds so unreal. It felt unreal. Believe it or not, I'm just glad to get the story out after so long. Well, someone called the cops. It wasn't a babysitter in this story. Thankfully, this person had the foresight to hit the panic button or whatever to bring the police into the situation. It just makes no sense. Did this woman get jail time? Story 2. So when I was 1.5, my brother was born prematurely at 28 weeks. He had to be C-sectioned, had a night heart rate, and was blue, perishing from lack of oxygen. During the C-section, due to lack of oxygen and the high blood pressure, a synapse popped in his brain, making it so he doesn't know where he is in space and can't control his limbs. Similar to cerebral palsy, he was in the NICU for 2 months. Luckily, he lived, but it came at a cost, because once we were fully able to take him home, he wouldn't eat, wouldn't breastfeed, no formula would work, and whatever he did eat, he'd throw it up almost immediately. He was slowly starving to death in the first 3 months of his life, so we took him to the hospital, where after an x-ray, they discover his intestines are tied in a knot, and something else is wrong with his kidney, but I don't have much info on that. So they have to perform a surgery, but of course, the doctors mess up. You see, they were supposed to give him like 10% of this medicine that if there was more than that, could easily unalive him, and 90% this other medicine to nullify the effect of the other one. I'll ask my dad which medicine in particular, but the doctor switched it to 90% poison, 10% nullifier. He flatlines. It's touch and go for 20 minutes. He's clearly going to expire, so the doctors call my parents and tell them they have to say goodbye. They get there around 20 minutes later, and my dad gets on his knees and screams to the Lord to let his son live. As my brother flatlines for the last time that night, my dad begs and prays to God, then a beep, and he comes back. My brother's heart rate starts to rise. He was touch and go for 45 minutes, clinically dead for 5 of those. He's a happy and somewhat healthy 15-year-old who will never be able to live on his own and doesn't understand much of what's around him, but he's happy and alive, and that's all that matters. Clinically, he's diagnosed with autism and Noonan syndrome. That was a great story of survival, but what does that have to do with calling the cops on the parents? Nothing the parents did was the problem. They just lost the genetic lottery. I mean, it's not like either of the parents smoked or drank or anything while they were pregnant, did they? What did your crush do that killed your interest? Story 1. Had a crush on a girl at work for a few months, but I heard she was interested in my friend there, so I tried to keep my distance as it seemed he shared her interest. Long story short, she confessed to returning my feelings instead and insisted that everyone was misunderstanding her feelings toward my friend. Very shortly after we started a relationship, she casually mentioned plans to go to a concert with my friend. Just the two of them. I mentioned that he had probably seen it as a date and told her I was fine with her going, as long as she let him know we were in a relationship. Shortly after that, I hear that the two of them are going bowling together for his birthday. Again, just the two of them. Again, she acts naive to the implications, as these were plans they'd made long ago as friends. Again, I said I was fine with it as long as everyone was respectful. But what made me lose interest was when she became very sick and I took her home. She absolutely refused to let me go up to her apartment with her despite being deliriously sick. I chalked it up to the fever, and we agreed I would be back in the morning with homemade soup, tea, etc. So I go back and wait, and wait, and wait. I waited and called intermittently for hours. She had told me her roommate was an alcoholic and dangerous, so I became increasingly worried. In my mind, my girlfriend was alone and vulnerable in a space with a dangerous man. I kept calling every now and then, so I was quite freaked out by the time she finally called back almost a full day later. She completely dismissed everything, saying she was just sleeping and that I was crazy. I sensed one too many red flags, and before I had the chance to break things off, she pulled the "I'm not ready for a relationship" card, and we called it quits. Less than 2 weeks later, she was giving my friend hickeys, but still insisting there was nothing going on. I noped out of there completely at that point. Come to find out, her dangerous roommate was her longtime boyfriend, whom she had been living with for a year and a half. She had also been stringing my friend along for months before we dated and made her move immediately after we broke up. He had zero relationship experience, and she's very beautiful, so I don't hold much against him. He was more respectful of our relationship than she was. Sounds like she's trying to develop her manipulation skills. Do you think she deliberately tried to keep as many guys on the hook at the same time as possible? Or do you think she was more naive and just naturally didn't want to break things off with guys? It kind of sucks that she couldn't just be honest with everybody. Were any of these guys giving her money? Story 2. There was this one guy I had a crush on in middle school. He was a grade above me. I thought maybe he liked me too, but never had the guts to talk to him. Years passed, and I had already graduated high school 2 years prior. He messaged me on Facebook asking to take me out on a date. I said yes, and we went ice skating. Everything was going well. We decided to meet up at a second place, but decided to take our own cars. I don't remember why. His car battery ended up dying on him, so he called me and asked if I could give him a jump start. Of course I would. So I had to go home to get the jumper box my dad had, because my cables are terrible, and then drive back. He ended up canceling early and just wanted to go home because he was worried his car wasn't going to make the drive. He was also probably a little embarrassed, both understandable. He said we should set up a second date, though, and I agreed. Second date comes around and was having a good time until it started to get cold, and he gave me his jacket. I thought things were going very well. We sat in my car and just talked for a few hours, until he brought up a couple subjects that I, and literally any sane person, definitely saw as large red flags. He brought up politics and learned that we both have different views, which I don't mind, but every time I would counterclaim his claim, he would get angry and would look at me like I was stupid and tried to make it into an argument versus a discussion. Whenever I talked about my views, he would just have that gross narcissistic snide smirk slapped on his face. You know the one. Also, trigger warning, SA. And then he later brought up the fact that his friend went to prison for violating children. He said his friend was innocent and that his friend would never do such a thing, and that both little girls and their entire families were lying and made it all up. Yeah, no. I didn't know what to say or do, so I pretty much ended the date right there with some excuse, and never talked to him again. Those red flags seem to have cropped up extremely quickly. Sounds like everything was going really smoothly right up until that point. I'm pretty sure it wasn't about the different political views, but about his attitude. He seemed really defensive about his views and that they were the right views. And how dare anyone have a different opinion that they would actually try and defend? That doesn't fly very well. Which leads into his attitude towards his friend's actions. Just glad she got that part out of the way so she could end the relationship right there. Story 3. Almost 2 years ago, during my senior year of high school, one of my closest friends since freshman year, female, told me she had feelings for me, and she knew I had gained somewhat feelings for her recently at the time. She told me if I was willing to wait for her to be ready. I said sure, but truly I didn't, which honestly I just didn't want to be rude and just say no. After I had graduated, she invited me to her dad's house, who was ex-military with minor PTSD, which I made sure to be cautious about. After spending the day carving pumpkins with her, talking to her family and even her dad, which I honestly didn't mind doing so and thought he was cool, on the way back home, he talked to me about my music taste and stuff I was into, even inviting me to come hang out with him at a dirt bike event 2 weeks from that day. She was present for this. For 2 weeks straight afterwards, she had ghosted me after I had sent her memes and tried talking to her like usual. She ended up telling our friend group we had a falling out, which I wasn't even aware of, and tried making it seem like I was obsessed with her, which I clearly wasn't. Once I had told my friends my side of the story, they understood what she said didn't sound right. I even ended up talking to her directly as well about it because I'm not scared to confront someone about problems. She told me that she felt I was ignoring her dad and that his PTSD was kind of acting up after meeting me, putting the blame on me after she literally witnessed me having a really good conversation with her dad, even had him laughing, inviting me to come hang out with him before Thanksgiving. I lost so much interest and stopped talking to her afterwards. Not even today I associate myself with her. I think she was actually jealous of the attention her dad was getting from this guy. I think this guy was building up a better rapport with the dad than anybody had in the past. She was jealous of that and made up these whole stories about having a falling out and him being obsessed in order to try and save some kind of face. Or maybe she doesn't like a guy that gets along with the dad. Maybe she likes a kind of rebel guy. What was your holy hell, need to get my life together moment? Story 1. Happened just this week, actually. I've been suffering from anxiety and depression since 2015, when I let a girl really mess with my head. At the time, I had left a great job I enjoyed that paid the bills and then some, so it was a good gig. In the time of knowing this girl, I had alienated my entire friend group, who were more like my family because my real family and I have a very shaky relationship. That was 2016, and ever since, I've been completely alone. I've spent the last 3 years working jobs for no longer than 3 months at a time. I've had 10 different jobs in these 3 years. I've lost all sense of self and became more depressed because of that, and the feeling that I may never come to terms with who I truly am happy to be. All the while I've been stoned from sun up to the time I fall asleep at night, basically using weed as a crutch to enable myself not to turn my life around. I enrolled in community college January 2018, hoping to change all of that. All the while never being able to actually be sober for an entire day. I floated through 6 months of college absorbing basically none of the material, but somehow maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I've realized now that it's finals week that I've doomed myself doing that. I'm even more stressed now that I'm studying for all these finals and can't remember any of it. This last week, I've made the decision to quit smoking and truly try to make a change. It's now day 3 sober, and I honestly can't recall a time where I felt more clear-headed. Still stressed that I'm probably going to fail all my tests, but I know at least I'm putting in real effort now, and it feels so damn redeeming. What kind of job was he doing beforehand? It sounds like it was a job he lucked out in getting if it didn't require a college degree. There should be a follow-up on this one. I really hope he passes his exams. I'm glad he's now putting the real effort in, and it would be a shame to waste that 4.0 GPA, even if he did breeze through it. Story 2. 3 days ago. I'm cleaning my room because the landlord will be here tomorrow. It's 3 a.m. I'm sorting through stuff I need to get rid of. I find a letter that was assigned to me as a school project my senior year. The letter was supposed to be addressed to my future self. Being as invested as I was about the people around me liking me at the time, I asked other people to write to me instead. 3 people I knew did so I read their letters to me. I had read them before, but my memory is so bad I forgot what the hell they said. All 3 told me I was so awesome in their own way. Told me how nice I was. They appreciated me. All this stuff. I'm sitting here out of shape, in a job I don't in any way care about, in the town I grew up in, 4 total years later, and it dawns on me. Nothing about me has changed, other than my abilities declining and my hairline receding. Not a Godzilla thing. I totally hate myself. I spent 4 years of my only life pandering to people who didn't and don't care about me, instead of finding something I was interested in and absolutely focusing on that. Setting goals that I cared about. Trying to be a better person. Matter of fact, forget being a better person, just trying to be myself in some way. Letting myself be ambitious and selfish, lusting after and tasting success. Hell, I wouldn't mind having a degree in something by now. I wouldn't mind at least being worth more money, or even feeling fulfilled by goals that I met. So I'm realizing just now that I need to get my life together. There's nothing wrong with doing work for other people, as long as that doesn't become your whole identity. Helping other people is great, but if you never have any time for yourself, it's just never going to be fulfilling for you. You need to figure out what you want to do, even if it might seem like the most trivial thing in the world. As long as it doesn't harm you or anybody else, then great, pursue it. Find a way to make it work. Story 3. I was depressed out of my Godzilla mind for about 1.5 years. It destroyed my life. I treated my friends like feces, quit all my hobbies, and my grades went to hell. I hated every second of being alive, and I was so ready to end it all. The only thing that kept me hanging on was the hope that I was going to get into a good college and get away from all the things that made me so sad. However, being depressed also made me not give a care about my college applications. So despite having a good GPA in ACT, I bombed the essays and turned parts in late, which meant I didn't get into any of the schools I wanted to go to. The day the decisions came out, I was a wreck. I spent 2 days sitting in my room, bawling my eyes out and cutting like crazy because I thought I had no reason to live anymore. Thankfully, I had a moment of clarity where I realized that the only place to go was up, and that I was the only one responsible for making that change. I was finally sick of feeling sorry for myself and letting myself wallow in being so lonely and hopeless. It's been a few months now, and I can honestly say that I'm happy for the first time in a very long time. I've put effort back into all the relationships in my life. I finished high school strong, and I'm putting so much effort into my mental and physical well-being. Having my dreams fall apart and realizing it was my own fault was the wake-up call I needed to realize that things needed to change if I wanted to stay alive. That feels like a pretty heavy realization to have right before you're finishing high school. Honestly, this sounds like the confession of someone going through a midlife crisis. Depression can be as debilitating as any physical disability. If he truly got out of this hole by himself, that's amazing. At least he was able to foster his relationships and rekindle them again. Story 4. I had just been left by my now ex-wife, who left out of the blue to go be with her new thing in Hawaii. I hate Hawaii now. Through a complicated arrangement where I was living in an apartment owned by my ex's boss, this bridge got burned during the divorce. I was being kicked out and was in the process of sleeping in my car and trying to find a new place. I was extremely depressed and was drinking all day every day, even while driving. So one day, I was driving home from work, about a 90-minute commute wherein I would drink beer and smoke weed to stay alert. A cop pulled behind me on the freeway and followed me for a good 5 minutes. He then put on the lights. I seriously almost pooped my freaking pants. I've never been so scared in my life. I knew I was done for. There was no way to cover up. So I pull over, he walks up, and before he even reaches my window, a car rear-ends another car at full speed about 50 feet behind us. The cop says something like, "Get out of here safely," and then turned around running to go address the car accident. I was seconds away from losing my license, my job, my whole life, really. I didn't drink for a few months after that encounter, and I've since gotten that under control. But damn, it was the scariest moment ever. But it sure kicked my butt into gear. What has been the best corporate Darwin Award? A decision made by a company that basically unalived the business. Story 1. Kodak telling the creator of digital photography to go curse himself. Sad thing is, they had the technology first in the 70s and put it off for so long because the cost would be so large for consumers. Then they just totally mistimed everything. They dug their own grave. Kodak's slogan should be, "You shoot the pictures, we shoot ourselves in the foot." This goes so much deeper than anyone knows. My father was on the cutting edge of Kodak, working in research and development. There are literally so many times Kodak sold off patents on products that were ridiculously expensive to produce. My favorite example. Remember when CD players were ridiculously expensive? It was because of the lens. Cost a ton to produce it. Remember when the price dropped? Yeah, Kodak sold the patent to Sony. $50,000. There was an employee who worked at Kodak who developed this specialized process. For doing something, can't remember exactly what. Kodak didn't want it. Sold that employee the patent for $10,000. He's a millionaire now. It ticks me off because it was basically the nail in the coffin for Rochester, New York, and as a side effect, the whole region. Our biggest employer now? A hospital and a grocery store. Thanks a ton, Kodak, Xerox, and Bausch & Lomb. Wegmans is more than a grocery store, damn it. It's a way of life. I know this would be the top comment. People think Kodak was a photography company, but this is simply wrong. Kodak was a chemical manufacturer more than anything else. Most of what they did was more similar to 3M than Nikon or Canon. Kodak was about 5% about optics, photography, and sensitometry. Basically, calibration of light-sensitive materials and print processes. This expertise would transfer well into the digital field. But that tremendous engineering expertise and intellectual property was all in support of a giant operation devoted to turning plastic, gelatin, and silver into imaging products, and producing millions of gallons of chemistry to develop it. Undoubtedly, there were people at Kodak who saw the future of digital photography. Even if they had maintained dominance in making digital camera sensors, they still would have had to shutter all of the factories they had as of 1990 and lay off almost all the people. Imagine for a moment an alternate reality where Kodak started the most popular brand of digital cameras, Flickr, and Instagram. What if the old Kodak would have survived? What they did hope to do was be the manufacturer of digital printers. They made huge investments in dye sublimation printers, which were defeated by inkjets. But we don't have to see this as a bad bet. They bet on the only technology that they could win with. Anyone can make ink. I'd argue that they'd make bank if they made ink. Ink continues to be probably the most expensive product, aside from oil. And also, there are a lot of old companies that have survived going through a bunch of different products. Nintendo is a very old company. They existed long before video games. They started off making card games. Story 2. This won't be a top story, but one of amazing stupidity. It was the late 1990s, the middle of the tech boom in San Diego. One of the hearts of the tech boom. A small consulting company had about 100 programmers contracted out to about a dozen companies. The profits were huge. The company charged $200 per hour per person, paid the employee about $70 per hour, pocketed the rest. The only overhead was the small main office, a recruiter, an HR person, and an accountant to handle all of that money and small expenses. Then the company scored big. Microsoft headquarters in Seattle wanted some of these people, contracting about a dozen of them to start. The profits were so huge, the programmers were flown back to San Diego each weekend. The deal was still per hour, and Microsoft loved the people and asked them to work through weekends, saving the company the cost of airfare and bringing in a couple of extra $1 million. So 2 months later, expense reports are getting kicked back. The company was refusing to pay large parking fees for the people who work 7 days a week for 3 and 4 weeks. The company accountant said, "Should have taken a cab to the airport since they were gone for 3 weeks." After reminding the accountant that they had not intended to stay that long, that they did so at company request, they were still refused reimbursement on parking. 5 of those contractors resigned due to the parking payment issue, and others slowly followed. The Microsoft deal collapsed because they kept losing people, and within the year, the whole company folded. Yes, this company folded during the tech boom in a boom city. Hundreds of millions of dollars lost because they wanted to mess over the most income-producing employees over maybe $2,000 in parking fees. Hilariously short-sighted management decisions bringing down a company. It happens surprisingly often. Sounds like it just came down to a case of numbers, like the accountants making the decisions. Did no one higher up try to think this through? I mean, what was the cost of the airfare? When you compare that to the parking fees, you were probably getting a bargain if they stayed. Story 3. Recently, the closest I've ever seen a company come to the brink and rebound, Market Basket in the northeastern U.S. There were 2 parties really involved. The CEO, Arthur T. Demolis, ATD, who was loved by the employees and customers for running the business with a customers and employees first attitude. His cousin, Arthur S. Demolis, ASD, who controlled the majority of the shares in the board of directors. ATD's side had lost control of the majority shareholdership in the mid-90s after a court ruled in ASD's favor and awarded his family members 50.5% of the business. There were holdouts on ASD's side that didn't budge to family pressure to completely get rid of ATD, until last year when the holdout passed away, leaving his wife the shares. She switched sides on the board, and they fired then-CEO ATD and brought in 2 CEOs with notorious histories of gutting companies. The employees, seeing the writing on the wall that the then-profitable company was slated to be sold off to the highest bidder, changing the corporate atmosphere and dynamics, started to rally in the streets and eventually walked off the job en masse. Soon, the customers followed, and the chain of grocery stores was left empty and bleeding money. Heard quotes of upwards of $1 million a week from a single store in the 72-store chain. The battle raged for over a month, the employees refusing to work for anyone but ATD, and the board and CEOs refusing to bring him back to the company. In the end, the shareholders sold their stock to ATD and resolved the issue, but not until they were supposedly on the brink of bankruptcy, being only days away from having no operating cash left. It seems kind of rare these days to see a company where the employees really rally behind the CEO and want to work there. You don't really see that kind of loyalty. I guess they really did rebound. It's good that they came from the brink from that. Can you think of any other companies where people really rally behind the CEO and really want to be there? What are you absolutely sick of being romanticized? Story 1. Oh my gosh, I like my desk to be super neat and I like my house to be clean, so I must have OCD, you know? No, that is not OCD. OCD is not a fun thing to have. It is not defined as person who likes to clean, nor is having OCD productive in that matter. A person with OCD suffers from thoughts they do not want to have. Sufferers of this disorder try to fight the thoughts away, but since you can't control your thoughts, the thoughts remain. This leads to compulsive behaviors in order to satisfy the obsession. An OCD person may have thoughts about hurting people in violent or grotesque ways. They obsess about it. They can't stop thinking about it. Then they start to wonder, Am I at risk of being violent? Could I really do something terrible to people? What if I lose control? Is this how insanity starts? What if I just watch violent horror movies? Oh my God, I enjoyed that. Holy hell, I'm a bad person. Oh my God, I have to take drastic measures to make sure I never, ever, 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 ever hurt anyone. Then they proceed to take measures that severely limit the quality of life, even though they were never going to cause harm to anyone in the first place. But while this is happening, the person is screaming at themselves from the inside going, "You know you're not violent. What are you even worried about? Stop thinking about this stuff. You're fine. Stop it." OCD does not mean I like things to be clean. That is a preference for things to be clean. Maybe even more so than some other people, and it makes you a totally normal person. An OCD person who cleans does not want to clean. They very desperately wish to stop thinking about germs. They wish to end all thoughts about cross-contamination. They wish they were just normal people who didn't feel the need to clean for hours of the day. But they can't stop thinking about cleaning. I don't want to clean anymore, but if I don't, something awful is going to happen and my whole life, career, and marriage will be derailed. They have anxiety about it. They have panic attacks over it. I work a sales job. I check my sales numbers at least 50 times a day. If I don't, I feel like I've lost sales and I'm not getting my commission. I do this constantly. I've actually left work, made a U-turn, had security open up my office after hours so I could check my sales numbers, even though I already knew what they were. I've obsessed over stupid things like how many hours of sleep I got last night. Tee-hee, I'm so OCD. OCD is not fun, dude. It's hell. Stop romanticizing a disorder that you do not have nor do you understand. I think this comes from how people with disorders are portrayed in TV and movies. Since those things are life with the boring parts cut out, they're usually either portrayed as funny or quirky or not that big of a deal. It's almost like doing this by labeling yourself with some kind of condition sort of denies you the ability to have confidence in your own personality. It's like you blame your negative parts on something you probably don't think you can control. It's kind of cheating yourself out of being true to yourself. Story 2. Women being treated like princesses. Now, not to be confused with disliking or hating women. My partner is a hero, but my poor brother waits on his girl hand and foot, and she appreciates none of it. She gets stroppy as hell if he asks her to lift a finger. All the while, she reads stupid romance and watches these awful love movies, and genuinely gets upset if he hasn't changed overnight to become her new type of man. She gets so wounded if he does something on his own, but if they go out together, nobody gets to talk to him because he's too busy getting more ice or a different color straw or sending her food back for her. She justifies her behavior with examples of fictional men doing ridiculous things for love. Absolutely drives me demented. A sheer sense of entitlement because she thinks all girls should be treated like a movie star on the red carpet. Let us all take a moment of silence for this brother. Can we have a moment of loud group appeal to the brother to leave her and try to move on with his life immediately after the moment of silence? It was kind of like this with my ex. She needed to be with me constantly. She did have other friends, but whenever I wasn't with her and them, she would complain about them. She didn't care about what I wanted, only what she needed. If I went out and didn't text her like every 30 minutes, she would get ticked. If I wanted some peace and quiet and play some games with my friends, then I apparently didn't love her anymore. It felt like psychological torture as she would send me WhatsApp voice recordings of her crying because I hated her. And on our 1-year anniversary, I got her one of those teddy bears that holds hearts with text on them. She called me up ticked because this better not be the only thing you're getting me for my anniversary. The next day, I sent her home, called her up when she got home, and told her I was breaking up with her. Ran out of the house and went to my best friend's birthday party, which she forbade me to go to the day before because there will probably be other women there. But as I was making my way there, she called me. said that she was going to unalive herself and screaming on the phone, so I just said, "No, please don't. Think about your family before you do that." Then she hung up, and I think she expected me to call back, but I just blocked her number. I learned my lesson after that. Not that I will use that lesson for a while, as my self-esteem is at an all-time low, but at least I learned something. Rom-coms are really good movies to relax with, but they are entirely unrealistic quite a lot of times. If a man did all the things men do in movies to get the girl's attention, like visiting them at their work, continually calling them, playing music outside their house, being a general annoyance, they'd be arrested on stalker or creeper charges. It didn't occur to me that there are women that actually really buy into that whole thing and expect to be treated that way. It's important to value women, but it's also important to value yourself. Story 3. Oppression. I'm in my early 20s, and I see a lot of people claiming to be oppressed in my age group. It really devalues actual struggles when a young guy with a part-time job that constantly parties claims to be oppressed and won't take responsibility for the fact that their life is in shambles. An old high school friend is this entirely. Rich Dad, who is the CEO of a national temp agency. She grew up in a 3-story mansion with a pool and numerous pets. New cell phone every year, Gucci wallet, corporate boxes for sports games and concerts, etc., etc. She's also white, young, able-bodied, and was raised Catholic. Then, high school ended. It didn't take long for her to come out as genderqueer. She left home and moved into a flat full of alternative, quirky, gender-fluid people. She converted to eclectic Wicca and is self-diagnosed bipolar, schizophrenic, multiple personalities, and gender dysphoria. She also says she has depression, anxiety, autism, high functioning of course, selective mutism, despite never shutting up, OCD, sociopathy, borderline personality disorder, EDNOS, and a heart condition. She talks a lot online about spoon theory and not having enough spoons to get through the day. She has never had a job. She used to apply to places, but now gets a disability benefit from the government. And of course, she's oppressed. She talks about her Irish heritage and how even now people still discriminate against the Irish. She is naturally discriminated against for her religious beliefs, her gender identity, her piercings, her weight. She was slim in high school, but a diet of deep-fried frozen things, toast and pizza will cause any waistline to expand. Her one teeny wrist tattoo, her mental and physical disabilities, and her financial status, i.e., everything she has either chosen to become or has been able to fix but hasn't. She complains that she wants to go to university but can't because of discrimination. She failed high school. She doesn't even have a driver's license. Her life sucks, and of course it's all the fault of cis-white capitalists. In her defense, though, she has got to have a mental illness. No sane person could put all that hogwash off sincerely. Everyone suffers. It's how we react to our suffering. Again, it goes back to that idea of taking something that you probably would be able to fix and blaming it on some sort of condition that you think is beyond your control. Everything that was mentioned in this story, there's someone that actually suffers from it. And I use that word, suffer, because they do. Just saying you do doesn't qualify you. I wonder how this person got a disability if she was self-diagnosed for all these things.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.